Well, look, let's talk to Nigel Harris about this. He's the former managing editor of Rail magazine and joins us. Good morning to you, Nigel.
Good morning, Julia. How are you?
Very well indeed. Lovely to talk to you. Now, you're someone who actually knows about this stuff rather more than most of the civil service and politicians, and indeed people like us pontificating on this. I can remember interviewing back in, 2011, people, who was, high-level people involved in the HS2, managing directors and things like that, and already thinking, this is going to go, for want of a better phrase, tits up. I think that is a phrase I probably can get away with this time in the morning. We're talking about a £30 billion project that was going to be 250 miles of railway line. It was going to join the great cities of the north to London, high-speed rail, 30 billion quid, great value for taxpayers. I mean, not a single bit of that is now true. Should the whole thing be scrapped?
No, it shouldn't, because we've already spent a vast amount of money on it, and it would be madness to stop now, because we've got, if you fly over the route, there it is. There are tunnels built, and it's there. In your intro, you were right in what you said about us not being able to build motorways or anything else. The one factor which links all those is government meddling. We are more than capable of building stuff really well. I mean, Crossrail, the Elizabeth line, is a fantastic engineering achievement.
It was late and more expensive, but it is. It is impressive.
Yes and no. I mean, they put more money in at the end to replace money which politicians had insisted taking out earlier on. We always go through this with infrastructure. But no, it would be madness to stop it now. And your partner there was absolutely right about civil servants. The way they contracted the first phase of HS2 at first was insane. And a number of us said so. Just very briefly, if you employed a builder and said, I want you to build this extension, but then I want you to take responsibility for it for the next 20 years, and if there's as much as a crack in the plaster, you're going to pay to fix it. That's how the government contracted many parts of the first building. So the corporate credit card comment was about right. Money was absolutely squandered. The Treasury put in vast amounts of contingency. But the big one recently, which nobody's talking about, is we heard the other day that food inflation is down to about 6%. Construction inflation, sand, cement, gravel, steel, all the stuff you use to build stuff, is running at between 25 and 30%.
Wow.
And that is where the big hike has come from.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be fair, long before 2020 and all the lockdown and Ukraine pressures on inflation, I mean, it had already been expected that it would go up from around the 30 billion mark to around the 100 billion mark, but then that was for at least the line from London to Birmingham and then all the way to Manchester and all the way to Leeds. Now we're just talking about basically best part of 100 billion for just a sort of a fraction of that line.
Well, the last serious review was about 80 billion. But, whether it's Eurostar or HS1, all big infrastructure projects end up costing more than you bargained for.
Yeah, exactly. And that is a failure of civil servants, but also the fact that everything takes so long. I mean, everyone talks about, China's built X number of high-speed rail lines, X number of power stations, and they build new cities for a population of 20 million people, sort of, in 5 years. Look, we don't do that because it's a smaller country. There's always someone who owns that land, owns that house. There's someone who's concerned about the habitat of the lesser spotted newt, and there are other concerns. And we are blighted by the fact that we're kind of one of the first countries to have railway lines in the Victorian era, so that we've got these old lines. We haven't been able to sort of start from scratch. So there are already issues there, and we have to accept those. But the thing here is, the whole point of HS2, it was sold to us on the basis that this was about high speed. Well, it won't be quicker. It'll actually be a minute longer on average to travel to London. The capacity won't be any greater, and it won't level up. It won't actually do anything really to help the north-south divide, because what people in the Midlands and the north have been crying out for is to speed up the train travel and the capacity between those cities. So, the east-west lines of this Northern Rail powerhouse, that's what they want. And meanwhile, when tens of billions of pounds are spent on getting to London a little bit quicker, that doesn't help anyone.
It's never been about speed, Julie. From the very first speeches by Andrew Adonis, who launched it as a Secretary of State in 2008-9, it has always been about capacity. But the government has done a singularly poor job of communicating that. And this business that it was about speed somehow took root. It has never been about speed.
I've spoken to minister after minister of all different political hues who talked about that being the issue. But as you say, it's quite wrong that it is. Wouldn't the money... I mean, look, the idea also that this isn't even going to go all the way into Euston and to the centre of the capital city. It's going to go to some place that, by the way, no one I know had ever heard of in West London called Old Oak Common. So, I mean, it's just, absolutely ludicrous. So it's not going to be a line that's going to be any use to anyone, really. If you spent a fraction of that money on... electrifying lines in the north. I understand that only 15% of lines in the north of our country have electrified lines, electrified trains, whereas 80% in the southeast have. So you can move trains faster, you can have greater capacity because they're not as heavy, you can pull more carriages, so that sort of thing. Lengthening platforms so that you can have longer trains, building those high-speed rail links between the big cities of the Midlands and the north. That could be done for a fraction of the cost. Why was that not thought of?
Actually, it couldn't, Julia. You can't extend platforms as easily as you think.
I'm not saying it'd be easy, but even...
No, it's actually very difficult and will probably be as expensive because you've got to bulldoze large sections of towns surrounding those stations. If you put longer trains in, you need new signalling systems, and so as it goes on. The most cost-effective way to get the extra capacity we need is via HS2, providing politicians don't meddle with it. Your opening comments about Old Oak are absolutely on the money because you only get the benefits of HS2 when you get to Euston. As you just said, who gets up in the morning in the Midlands and says, I'm going to go to Old Oak Common today? Just about nobody. So if you do not do Euston, what the bottom line is, you end up with 80% of the costs of the whole project for 20% of the benefits. You lock in massive inefficiencies and very poor value for the taxpayer in the long term. And Old Oak Common is not big enough for a terminus. A through station, you get on trains, at a station, a train will come in, you get on, and it carries on in the same direction. It's maybe at the platform for 2-3 minutes. That's called the dwell time. If you can't build a big enough terminus at Old Oak Common because a terminus station, a train has to come in and it takes at least 20 minutes to disembark it, clean it, get it ready to go and get rid of it again. There is not the room at Old Oak for enough platforms to do that efficiently. So what you will do if you terminate it at Old Oak is limit the capacity of the whole network forever, because the trains will bunch up and can't get in and out of the end station quick enough. This is the most balmy suggestion you could possibly come up with, allegedly to save a few bob.
Well, you summed it up beautifully there. Nigel Harris, former managing editor of Rail magazine.